As I mentioned last night, as many know, my family had the blessing to travel extensively this past summer. And so last night I spoke about having the courage to start an adventure. And this morning I'll speak about the strength that we need to make it all the way back home. We are lost. We are lost, and we don't know where to go next. We are lost in this pandemic. We thought it would last a few weeks, perhaps. Then we thought it would end this summer. But it is clearly going to last through the fall, maybe a few years or longer. And so we are lost because we said the journey would be over by now, and yet we find ourselves still on that path, not knowing where the finish line is. And we are lost in our politics. We thought that too would just be a seasonal war. We thought our hatred of the opposing side of the aisle was limited to the months leading up to elections. It is not. The political divide in our society is not following any political cycle anymore. The second the election was over, signs went up for the 2024 campaign. It's been almost 50 years since Roe v. Wade. It is once again at the head of our political table. We are angry, we are tired. That's what it feels like to be lost. And among other issues, we're lost in our environment. Fires return annually. Hurricanes hit New Orleans on the very anniversary of Katrina. It seems sometimes like breaking news is just playing reruns. It seems like we are going in circles, seeing the same tragic landmarks over and over again. What keeps me up at night, though, is that in our impatience with the pandemic, our political anger and our environmental defeats, all justified, that we are lost with each other. When this pandemic is over, when politics civilize, when clean energy is the obvious choice, where will we be with those we disagreed with? Where will we be with those who scared us? Where will we be with those with whom we lashed out in anger? If we solve the pandemic medically, but we no longer trust our neighbor morally, we have not succeeded. If we bridge the political divide in Washington but cannot debate the issues our country faces with civility around our dinner table, we have not succeeded. If we save the world from environmental disasters but do not know how to share it with each other, have we truly given our children and grandchildren the world they deserve to inherit? I worry that we may save the world, but in the process divorce ourselves from each other. When lost in a pandemic, in politics, or in the environment, medical scientists, political scientists, environmentalists will show us the way home. But when you are lost in the world, the prophetic words of Jeremiah tell us, it's up to us to set the path. Hatzivi lach tzionim shmilach, set up markers and make signposts. Shuvi betulat Yisrael, shvi el arich ela, set your heart on the highway, my child, and you come home. We cannot let the problems of today be our excuse for our divorce tomorrow. It is long past time that we admit to ourselves that the separation, the despise, the anger we feel towards others is not simply going to go away. We are lost, and we have to set up the markers that will bring us home together. If you think I'm being melodramatic, that I'm overstating how challenged we are, let me share the words of one who knows all about divorce, attorney Raoul Felder. He's the author of 8 books on the subject, but perhaps more famously or infamously, he was on one side of the table when the marriages of Rudy Giuliani, Elizabeth Taylor, and Mike Tyson were separated. Felder explains there are 3 emotions he sees consistently in divorce work. First, his clients feel wronged. Not just wronged the way you feel when your pizza is delivered 30 minutes late, he explains, they feel morally wronged. In his words, you'd think they were talking about the decline of civilization. Sound familiar? Second, they feel righteous. They know they are right without question. And third, when you get them in the same room, you find that they are talking about two totally different marriages, even though each person believes wholeheartedly in their truth. For too long, this is how we have felt, and we know it. We have felt morally wronged by each other. We have become righteous, at times self-righteous, knowing that our way is the only way, and we have become comfortable acknowledging that the world you live in is not the world I live in, and that should not be okay. Hatzivi lach shvi el arich ela. It is time, long past time, that we start putting down markers on the road, signposts that lead us back home, back to each other. In his speech to graduates at Purdue University this past year, the president of the university, Mitch Daniels, warned the graduating class of 2021 of falling into the trap that he has seen us fall into. He explained it as the scarring effect. The scarring effect is a change in beliefs about the probability of an extreme response to momentary events. We've been scarred. There's no shortage of scars from these last 18 months or even the years prior. And I imagine each of us could easily write down the list that relates just to our lives. Those lists run long and they cut deep. The scar of loss, perhaps the most prevalent. The scar left by the loss of a job, the loss of a spouse. Or perhaps the one that has felt most cruel to me these last months, the loss of being able to be with your spouse in the hospital, or God forbid, at their graveside. We should not take our scars lightly, and they are piling up. But we can't fall victim to the effect of them either. We cannot let our scars define our future. Midrash teaches that when a king and his wife argue and must separate, they must each hold on to the jewels of their crowns in order that they see the good in each other despite the pain they are experiencing. Scars are real and they hurt, but they are not the signposts that get us back home. We don't find the way home by asking how we were hurt. We get better, we get closer to each other by asking how we can heal. During a leadership briefing a few weeks ago, the Reform movement invited a nationally recognized infectious disease specialist to speak with synagogue leaders about the Delta variant. He unpacked the scientific data. He effectively brought it down to our very unscientific minds. He reserved one comment for his personal opinion. When the CDC publicized the July 27th changes, he said, the headlines read, "Vaccinated individuals should wear masks inside." The headline was wrong, he complained. Not wrong scientifically, but it's the wrong message. It highlights the scars that we will get. The message should have been, masks save lives. A week later, the CDC noticed the mistake, and new press releases were put out saying just that. They focused on how we heal, not how we will be hurt. Last Friday, my former congregation lost one of its great leaders, a former president of the congregation, the man who hired me for my first job. And he died of a breakthrough COVID case. He was just 64. If anyone has a right to be angry, it would be that family and the thousands of families who've lost someone with almost no notice over these last 18 months. And perhaps they are. But they were clear in their message. In sharing their loss, they also said, get vaccinated, wear masks, save lives so we can live life together. They talked about the people, the army of people who came to their aid, the heroes, the ones who helped, and it brought us all together from wherever we were. When we focus on our scars, we highlight what hurts rather than what helps. This is not to say that we should be fearless, because we are certainly living during scary times, but you do not fight the scary by focusing on the scar. You fight it by focusing on what heals. That, for me, is one sign that we have to put on our path as we start to turn towards home. The second sign. Jews don't say, "Why me?" We say, "Why us?" I learned this from Rabbi Richard Levy of blessed memory. He wrote, "Which is the greater challenge for a religious Jew? Personal tragedy or communal tragedy? Cancer, the death of a child, or the attempted murder of the Jewish people?" He answers, "We, Jewish people, suffer as individuals like all people do, and we have cried out to God to heal us, to answer the question, why me? But when tragedies befall our people, when the Jewish people were enslaved, when we were in exile, as our Haftarah reads, when we faced expulsion, when we faced pogroms in Europe, and of course the Holocaust. And when we look at Israel, consistently praying that she lives securely, justly, and peacefully with her neighbors, we don't ask, why me? We consistently ask, why us? The path home, the path back to each other, is not found alone. For when we ask only why me, we're facing a separation, a divorce. You ask why us, and we face each other. It's what Adam Grant, author, podcast extraordinaire, calls an expedition mentality. A mentality that puts the needs of the group first. The Jewish people have an expedition mentality because we know the costs of not having an expedition mentality. What happens if Moses does not lash out at the slave master and become passionate about his people? What if he just said, why me? What happens if Esther does not put the community first on Purim in her story? If she just said, why me? What happens if Oskar Schindler does not hire thousands of Jews, or a modern state of Israel is not created, as the Declaration of its independence reads, to be open for the ingathering of the exiles? Its very declaration says, why us? To be Jewish is to know that everyone faces the question, why me, at some point. Our strength from the days of the Bible to the last century has been that we have always made sure to ask about us, about each other. The pandemic, politics, the environment, they are not why me questions. They are why us questions. It's not about fear, it's about the expedition. It's about putting the needs of the masses before the needs of me. And we've always been good at this. It's been our crown jewel, because we're a religion focused on peoplehood, not a person. That is what has brought us home before. That's what our Haftarah tells us. It's what we will do again. We find our way home when we stop letting our scars scare us. We start putting healing before what hurts. We find our way when we ask about us, not just about ourselves. And we find our way home when we realize that that home is never, ever far away. Robert Frost defined home as the place where, when you have to go there, they have to take you in. Too often, on this path of separation, we have judged our place in the world by how far we have wandered and not how close we are to our destination. Last year, parents in our religious school gathered together and wrote a letter asking families to hang on during this pandemic. They said, now is not the time to leave the Jewish community simply because the doors are closed for a period of time, because we know that when this pandemic is over, we want the community to be there when we return. It worked. Due to their words, due to the work that they put together, to that of Lauren Trexler, our educator, to the great commitment of our religious school teachers and many others, our religious school has grown during the pandemic. It was the right message. but it was perhaps the wrong worry. Over the last year, we have not left the Jewish community. We have not had people leave the Jewish community out of a lack of commitment. In fact, I would say that due to our virtual experiences, some of you are utilizing today, many of you who rarely or maybe never came to the synagogue in person, you've become regulars. We worried about your commitment. The truth is, we underestimated your commitment. What we have seen as have synagogues across the country are people distance themselves from the Jewish community, sometimes leaving the synagogue because they feel that we, their Jewish community, left them. They feel we've wandered apart. According to some, at times we opened too quickly. For others, it was not fast enough. Policies regarding wearing a mask or checking vaccine cards at the door seem to define us today. It's not just those who feel that they are in the minority opinion who feel disconnected. We've allowed our worlds to become so distant from each other that too often we no longer believe they were ever the same. We've become too comfortable proclaiming that others do not belong here. It's become too easy to say that those people, the ones who do not understand me, the ones who have scarred me and angered me, threatened me with the choices that they made, that they do not belong. Home is a place where when you show up, we take you in. Our public squares are a home. Our schools are a home. Our houses of worship, for us, the synagogue is a home. It can never be far away, no matter how far we've wandered. When the modern state of Israel was created, it's precisely this promise that it made: a right of return, not just for the secular European Jews who wrote about it for centuries, who signed its Declaration of Independence. Israel is a homeland for every Jewish person, Polish and Persian, Reform and Orthodox, the most religious to the Russian who wears a Russian cross around his neck. Israel it cannot close her doors to us, because Israel is first and foremost a home, a Jewish home. So are we. It does not mean that we will agree. It does not mean that we will not speak proudly and publicly to the values we hold dear. It does not mean that we will permit people to endanger each other. It means we do not close the door to you. This space is a safe space, safe for gay Jews and straight Jews, for bleeding heart liberals and right-wing conservatives. It is a place, perhaps one of the few in our lives, that we can call home. No matter how far we wander, no matter how we have navigated the last 18 months, this home is still here, and we hope you will be too. But if you are not, if you take this moment to leave, we will miss you, but we won't close the door. We won't close the door because we don't do that. We are lost and scarred and hurt and angry and, simply put, tired of this whole mess.